There is a particular kind of silence that comes before catastrophe. Not the silence of peace, not the silence of sleep, the silence of a held breath, the world drawing in its lungs before it screams. She had learned to recognize it. She was sitting in the back of a black car, moving through Milan at speed, and the city outside was exactly as it always was: amber lights, wet stone, the ordinary cathedral of an ordinary winter night. And everything was wrong in a way she could not yet name, but could absolutely feel in her sternum, in the animal part of her that had been paying attention since the beginning. Victor was in the front seat. He had not spoken in 11 minutes. His eyes checked the mirror at intervals that were too regular to be casual. They were not going to Nikolai's apartment. She knew this because she knew that route. She'd taken it dozens of times, and they had passed the turn 3 blocks back. "Victor," she said, "where are we going?" He looked at her in the mirror. His expression, careful, controlled, a man deciding how much to say. "Victor," her voice was steady. She was proud of that. "Tell me what's happening." A pause. "There was a second incident," he said. She waited. "At the apartment." He watched the mirror, the road, the mirror. 40 minutes ago. A device, a small one, limited damage, but... He stopped. "We're relocating until we understand the scope." She heard everything he was saying, and also everything he was not saying. A device. At the apartment. At the place she had slept. At the place where Nikolai's books lived, and his piano lived, and a small piece of herself had started to live too. "Is he all right?" she asked, and her voice came out smaller than she'd planned. He wasn't there. Victor's voice was deliberately steady, keeping her steady. He'd already left. "He'll be at the location when we arrive." She looked out at the city. At the ordinary, oblivious city. "Sava Marchetti," she said. "We don't confirm." "Victor," she met his eyes in the mirror. "Don't manage me. Is it Marchetti?" A beat. "Yes," he said. She turned back to the window. Specific, patient people, Andre had said. They would use someone close to him. She pressed her fingers flat against the cold glass. The war had arrived. Chapter 11. The Safe House. The location was a building in Porta Romana, a neighborhood she didn't know well, residential and quiet, old apartment blocks and small restaurants, and the particular geography of a city going about its life without spectacle. The car stopped in front of a building with a red door, and before she'd fully collected herself, Victor was out and holding her door, and a second man she didn't recognize was moving them quickly through the entrance. Inside, a staircase, bare and clean, 3 flights, a door at the top. Victor knocked twice, then once. The sound from inside was movement, voices in Russian, and then the door opened, and Nikolai was there. She went to him without thinking, not running, but close. He caught her with both arms, not gently, not the careful, deliberate tenderness of their ordinary life, but something gripping and immediate, and held her face against his neck, and she felt the tension in him, the massive taut rope of it, and also felt it, fractionally, release. "I'm all right," she said, against his jaw. "I can see that," he said. His voice was rougher than usual. "I can see that." He held her for another moment, longer than was typical, longer than he would usually allow himself in front of his people. Then he drew back, hands on her shoulders, and looked at her with that searching, complete assessment. "You're sure?" he said. "I'm completely sure. Victor got to me before anything. I was in the gallery the whole time." She looked at his face, at the cut on his jaw, small, dried, a few hours old. "That's new," she said, reaching up. He caught her hand, turned it, pressed his mouth to her palm, in a gesture so private and deliberate that she felt it like a sound. "Shrapnel," he said. "Minor. I wasn't in the apartment." "I know, Victor told me." His jaw tightened. She felt the anger in him, not at her, not at Victor, at the situation, at Marchetti, at the precise calculation that had placed a device in the building where she slept, and called it a message. She looked past him at the room. It was large for a safe house, a converted apartment, clean and spare, functional. Victor and the second man were near the door. At a table in the center of the room, Two others she recognized from peripheral. Gregor, who she'd seen at the Sorrento estate on the first night, and a woman she hadn't seen before, mid-30s, dark-haired, with the particular quality of alertness that she'd come to associate with people in Nikolai's world who were trusted. And at the far end of the room, standing with his back to the window, arms crossed, looking at her with an expression that was simultaneously relieved and furious. Andrei. She shouldn't be here, Andrei said. She is here, Nikolai said, without turning. We proceed. Nika. We proceed, Andrei. Not a request, not even a command. A statement of reality delivered in the voice that didn't leave room for debate. Andrei's eyes moved to her. Whatever he read there seemed to settle something in him. He unfolded his arms and looked away. Nikolai guided her to the table with a hand at the small of her back. She sat. He remained standing. He never sat in these situations, she was learning. He paced, or stood, or moved, the physical expression of a mind that was always processing. Tell me everything, she said, from the beginning. The beginning, it turned out, was not 40 minutes ago. It was 7 weeks ago, before the Prague incident, before the 3 a.m. phone call that had started the unraveling. 7 weeks ago, a man named Caruso, who worked inside Nikolai's financial operation, had begun feeding information to Marchetti's people. Not operational intelligence. Caruso didn't have access to that level. But he had access to something almost more valuable. Patterns, routines, the shape of Nikolai's daily life, the address of his apartment, the name of the gallery where his partner worked, the knowledge that there was someone who mattered to him in a way that nothing had in a very long time. Caruso had been identified. He was being dealt with. But the information was already out. Marchetti's play, Nikolai said, moving along the edge of the room, his hands clasped behind him, is not to kill me. He's not stupid. He knows what killing me would cost him. The response from my family, from the Allied houses, from every person who owes me protection. He knows the arithmetic. It doesn't work in his favor. So what is the play? The dark-haired woman asked. Valentina gathered her name was Lena. She'd caught Victor using it. Leverage, Nikolai said. He wants to force a renegotiation of the Vienna agreements. There are clauses in those agreements that limit his expansion into certain Eastern markets. Clauses my family negotiated when he was still trying to establish himself. He's outgrown those limits. He wants them gone. A pause. He's telling me through the device that he has the capability to reach into my life, into the parts of it that are not business. He's telling me to come to the table, or the next device won't be limited. The room was very quiet. He's threatening her, Andrei said. He's threatening her, Nikolai confirmed. Flat, cold, the voice from 3 a.m. Valentina looked at Nikolai. He had not looked at her while saying this, had been looking at the table, the wall, Andrei, the floor, as though looking at her was something he was rationing, holding back for a moment when the composure wouldn't crack. Look at me, she said. He looked at her. His face, controlled, eyes the pale gray-green that she loved, and in them right now, something she hadn't seen before. Not fear, not anger, but something adjacent to both and worse than either. The particular expression of a man who is looking at the thing he cannot afford to lose, and calculating, furiously and without success, how to protect it. I want to talk to you alone, she said, before you make any decisions. Valentina, the situation requires 5 minutes, she said, alone. He looked at her for a long moment, then, everyone out. They sat across from each other at the safe-house table, and the room smelled of old plaster and coffee and the faint chemical tang of whatever had been used to clean the floor, and nothing about it was romantic or extraordinary, and she thought, this is where love actually lives, not in the beautiful apartment with the Bosendorfer, here, in the ugly necessities. You're going to tell me to leave Milan, she said. I'm going to ask you to leave Milan, he said. There is a difference. Is there? A pause. With you, yes, always. She looked at him. What if I say no? Then he stopped. The composed mask slipped fractionally, revealing the battle underneath. Then I will spend every resource I have, keeping you safe here. And it will be the most complicated and stressful exercise in containment I have ever attempted. because Marchetti is not the only threat in this city, and you are, his voice dropped. You are the single most important variable in my life, and the idea of something happening to you, because of what I am, Nikolai. I cannot be what I need to be in this situation if I am afraid for you every second, he said. The admission came with visible effort, a man being honest about a vulnerability because he'd promised her honesty. I can handle anything. I have handled everything. But not this. Not if it's you. She held his eyes. Listen to me, she said. I understand what you're asking. I understand why. And I want you to understand something in return. She reached across the table and took his hand. I am not a liability, a loose end or a leverage point, or a soft place in your armor. I am a person who loves you and who has chosen this and who is not going to let Sava Marchetti make me disappear from my own life because he wants to use me as a chess piece. His hand tightened around hers. Valentina. I'll be careful, she said. I'll do whatever Victor tells me to do. I'll stay where it's safe. I won't go anywhere alone. I'll follow whatever protocols you need. But I'm not leaving Milan. I'm not leaving you. A pause. If you ask me to leave for my own good, purely for my safety, not for your strategic clarity, I would consider it. But you're asking me because you can't think straight when I'm in danger. And I'm sorry, but that is not sufficient reason for me to disappear. He stared at her. You are, he said, the most infuriating woman I have ever met. You love me for it, she said. Catastrophically, he said. And then, unexpectedly, disarming, real, he laughed. A short, exhausted sound, but genuine. Absolutely catastrophically. She squeezed his hand. Tell me what happens next, she said. Tell me the plan. Chapter 12. The Plan. The plan had 3 parts. Part 1. Caruso. He would be removed from the operation and dealt with in a manner that Nikolai described as settled, which she understood meant consequences severe enough to deter future defections without, and he said this looking directly at her, making sure she heard it, without permanent harm. He has a family, Nikolai said. He made a choice I won't forgive, but his children didn't. Part 2. Marchetti. They would meet, not because Nikolai was capitulating, but because he needed Marchetti in a room where Nikolai controlled the variables. He expects me to either back down or respond with force, Nikolai said. I'm going to do neither. I'm going to give him exactly what he wants on paper, and I'm going to make him believe he's won. And then I'm going to dismantle everything he built in the eastern markets through means that cannot be traced to me, and that will take him 5 years to recover from. Part 3. Valentina. She would remain in Milan under Victor's close protection, based at the safe house for the duration, with a cover story, an unexpected gallery emergency requiring extended presence that would satisfy professional contacts without drawing attention. You said 3 parts, she said. What's part 3 actually? He looked at her across the table. The others were back in the room now, listening or pretending not to. Part 3, he said carefully, is making sure that when this is over, the exposure is neutralized. Marchetti needs to understand, clearly and permanently, that touching what is mine is inadvisable. What does that mean? She said, specifically. It means, he said with a precision that left nothing soft, that I am going to make it impossible for him, or anyone in his network, to use you as leverage, because the cost of doing so will be catastrophically higher than any gain, not through threat, through demonstrated consequence. A pause. Through something that happens to an associate of his, who has made himself similarly vulnerable. An eye for an eye. Yes. She breathed. I'm not comfortable with that, she said. I know, he said. But I understand why you're doing it. I know that too. His voice was quiet. I am not asking for your approval. I am telling you because I promised to tell you. She nodded slowly. This was the thing, she understood. This was the actual texture of what she'd chosen. Not just the books, and the piano, and the way he said her name. This, the specific moral weight of loving someone who did things she would not choose, for reasons she understood, in a world she'd walked into with her eyes open. She was not going to pretend it was clean. She was not going to leave, because it wasn't. Chapter 13. The Safe House Nights. They stayed at the safe house for 8 days. She had not expected it to be. She didn't have the right word. Good was wrong. Nothing about the situation was good. But there was something about the compression of it, the reduction of their life to a single space and a shared urgency, that stripped away every performative layer and left only what was essential. He worked at the table for hours, phone calls, documents, the kind of relentless strategic labor that she was beginning to understand was the true substance of his days. She worked too. The gallery had granted the emergency leave without difficulty, but she had projects she could carry forward remotely, and she set up a workspace at the other end of the table and did her own work while he did his. They ate together. They argued, genuinely argued one night, about a decision he'd made without consulting her regarding the timeline of the Marchetti meeting, and she held her ground, and he listened, and ultimately changed the timeline. And neither of them mentioned it afterward, except that the way he looked at her the next morning had something new in it. Not surprise, exactly. More like the specific pleasure of someone who has been respected in a way they weren't expecting, and finds it unexpectedly necessary. Lena, the dark-haired woman, turned out to be extraordinary, an intelligence operative who'd worked for a Ukrainian private security firm before Nikolai recruited her 6 years ago. She and Valentina found, to the apparent bewilderment of Victor and Andrei, that they liked each other. They talked in the evenings about things that had nothing to do with the situation. Lena's sister in Kiev, Valentina's years at the Barcelona gallery, the specific particular frustrations and satisfactions of being a woman who was competent in rooms full of men who needed to believe otherwise. Andrei thawed, slowly, measurably, like ice in a room that gradually warmed. He didn't apologize for coming to her office. That wasn't his way. But on the 4th night, sitting across from her while Nikolai was on a call, he said, "You haven't left." The tone was not accusatory. It was something closer to bewilderment. "No," she said. "Most people would have. I'm not most people." He was quiet for a moment. "He needs someone who stays," he said. Not to her, almost to himself, almost as if remembering something. He has always needed that, and he has never been willing to ask for it, because asking means it can be refused. He looked at her. "You didn't make him ask." "No," she said. That was the right thing. He said it as though it cost him something. She held his gaze. "I know you still think I'm a risk to him." "I think anyone who matters to him is a risk to him," Andrei said. "That doesn't mean it's not also the only thing that makes him bearable." She smiled. She couldn't help it. Andrei looked startled. Then, slowly, something like a smile ghosted across his face too. Gone quickly. But there. And left it at that. The nights were different from their ordinary nights. Smaller, quieter, without the architecture of their regular life to give them structure. There was one bedroom in the safe house. It had a window that looked out on a courtyard. No view, no city lights, just the anonymous interior of an old building. Gray walls, a single lamp. In that room, away from everything that wasn't essential, they were different too. Stripped down, more honest even than they'd been before, which she hadn't known was possible. He talked about his father, one night. About St. Petersburg in the winter of his childhood. The specific quality of that cold, the particular color of the sky over the Neva in January. His father had been a large, hard man, with a talent for warmth in the domestic space, and absolute coldness in every other. And the contradiction had shaped Nikolai in ways he was still mapping. "I learned early," he said, in the dark, "that the world outside required one face, and home required another. I became very good at maintaining both." A pause. "The problem is that after enough years, you lose the ability to put the other face down. The management becomes constant. The walls," he stopped. "The walls become who you are," she said. "Yes," a long pause, "until someone walks through them." She pressed her mouth to his shoulder. "I walked through a door by mistake." "I know." She could hear the smile in his voice. "The most consequential accident of my life." She laughed softly. He pulled her closer. She felt his breath in her hair, his heartbeat under her cheek. Steady now, the resting rhythm she'd memorized. "When this is over," he said, "I want to take you somewhere. Away from Milan, away from all of it for a while. Somewhere you've never been." "Where?" she asked. "I have a house on Lake Ohrid, Macedonia. It's quiet there. Very quiet. Old water, old mountains. I go there sometimes, when I need to." He paused. "When I need to be a different version of myself, for a little while." "You've never taken anyone there," she said. It wasn't quite a question. "No," he replied. She lifted her head to look at him in the dark. "What's there, besides the lake and the mountains?" "Not much. A boat, more books, a piano, older than the one in Milan, slightly out of tune." A pause. "Enough space to breathe." "It sounds extraordinary," she said. "I want to show it to you," he said simply. And the simplicity of it, the uncomplicated desire to share something precious, something private, something he'd kept to himself for years, was more intimate than anything they'd said that night. "Take me there," she said, "when it's over." "When it's over," he agreed. She settled back against him. The safe house was quiet. Somewhere outside, the city moved in its ordinary way, and somewhere out there, Marchetti was planning his next move, and Nikolai was planning 3 moves past that, and none of it touched this room, this moment. The two of them in the dark, with the old courtyard outside, and only what was real between them. She thought, "I will remember this, exactly this." She thought, "Even if everything else falls apart, I will remember this." She held on. Chapter 14. The Meeting. With Marchetti was on a Thursday, 12 days after the device at the apartment. She was not there. She was at the safe house with Lena, and a man named Bora, who she'd met on day 6, and who communicated entirely in monosyllables and extremely strong coffee. Nikolai had not tried to stop her from asking what the meeting would entail, and she had not asked more than she needed to know, and they had reached a wordless compact about it. She trusted him to do what he needed to do. He trusted her to be there when it was over. He had kissed her that morning with a particular quality. Unhurried, complete, present. That was, she understood, not goodbye, but something else. A bookmark. A promise made in physical language. She spent the day working, and trying not to count hours. Lena brought coffee at 2, and sat with her, and said nothing helpful, unhelpful. Just sat, present, which was exactly right. At 5:15, her phone lit up. Done. 2 hours. She exhaled. At 7:30, the black Mercedes appeared in the courtyard below. He came up alone. When the door opened and he was there, the same cut on his jaw, now nearly healed. A new weariness in his face, that was the specific weight of a day spent navigating people and situations that required every tool in his considerable arsenal. She crossed the room, and he met her in the middle, and they stood there, not speaking, his arms around her and her face against his neck, for a long time. "How did it go?" she finally asked. "As planned," he said. His voice was tired. "Marchetti thinks he got what he wanted. He will spend approximately 6 months believing that before the first of the consequences arrives. After the third, he'll understand what happened." A pause. "He won't be in a position to retaliate." She pulled back to see his face. "And the agreement? What you gave him?" "Legal," he said. "On paper. Technically compliant. Meaningless in practice, because of 3 clauses buried in the addenda that redirect the relevant market access through subsidiaries he's never heard of." A faint, exhausted smile. "I spent 4 years building that structure specifically for a situation like this." "You built a 4-year trap," she said. "I built a 4-year contingency," he said. "The outcome depends on whether he's as clever as he thinks he is." "And is he?" "No," Nikolai said simply. "He's not." She looked at him, at the tired face, and the healed cut, and the pale eyes, and all of it, all of what he was, the complicated, extraordinary, morally ambiguous, deeply human thing of him. "The apartment," she said, "it was damaged. Cosmetic damage. The device was placed to alarm, not to destroy. It's being repaired. He paused. The piano is fine. She laughed. A real laugh, a surprised one. You check the piano. First thing, he said, entirely without apology. She kissed him. Not gently, not carefully, directly, urgently, her hands in his hair and all the 12 days of held breath releasing at once. He responded immediately, his hands on her face, and the tired quality in him burned away in the space of a moment, and what replaced it was something fierce and present and fully, completely alive. I told you I wasn't going anywhere, she said, against his mouth. You told me, he agreed, low and close. Believe me next time. I already believe you, he said. I believed you the first time. I was afraid anyway. You were afraid, she said softly. I was terrified, he said without any particular performance of it, just the fact. She kissed him again, slower this time, felt the tension in his shoulders finally, genuinely release. It's over, she said. Chapter 15. The Return. The apartment had been cleaned and repaired in the 12 days they'd been away. The cosmetic damage, a scorched section of entryway wall, a door blown from its hinges, was gone. New paint, new door, the slight smell of fresh plaster, masked by the cedar and tobacco that was the apartment's fundamental scent. She stood in the doorway and looked at it and felt something complex. Home and not home, the familiar rendered strange by what had happened in it, what had been meant for it. Nikolai came in behind her, stood at her shoulder. We don't have to stay here, he said, if it feels wrong. She considered this, moved through the entrance, through the main room, touched the spine of a book on the nearest shelf. Worn, familiar, one of the books she'd started to think of as hers by proximity. It's just walls, she said. I'm not afraid of walls. She went to the piano. She ran her hand along the edge of the keys. The lid was closed. She opened it. Play something, she said. He looked at her. Play something, she said again. Fill the room with something that's ours. He came to the piano. She moved to the sofa and curled into the corner of it with her knees up and her chin on her hands, watching. He sat, adjusted the bench slightly, laid his hands on the keys. He played. Something she hadn't heard before. Not Scriabin, not Rachmaninoff. Something slower and more searching, with a melodic quality that felt deliberate and personal in the way of things written from, rather than about. The fire wasn't lit, but the lamps were warm, and outside Milan moved in its ordinary way, and the music was in all the space between everything. She listened and felt, with the specific clarity of a moment fully inhabited, that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. When he finished, the last chord faded, and the room was quiet in a new way, a different quiet from before, a full quiet. What was that? She asked. He was quiet for a moment. Something I've been working on, he said. For how long? Since November. A pause. Since a woman walked into my life through the wrong door. She looked at him across the room, at his hands still on the keys, at the scar through his eyebrow, and the pale, serious eyes, and the beginning of a smile that he hadn't yet let all the way out. It doesn't have a name yet, he said. Give it one, she said. He thought. Valentina, he said, and then the smile came all the way out. Obviously. Chapter 16. Cracks and Light. The following weeks had the specific texture of aftermath. Not peace exactly, not yet, but the beginning of something quieter. The reconstruction of a life that had been temporarily dismantled, reassembled now with a greater clarity about what it was made of and what mattered in it. She moved more of her things to his apartment. Not all of it. She kept her own space, kept the succulent on the gallery windowsill. It had, against all reasonable expectation, survived. Kept the particular routines of her own life that she wasn't willing to dissolve into his. He understood this. He was, she'd come to understand, constitutionally incapable of wanting her to be anything other than exactly what she was. It was the specific quality of his attention, the way it sought out the real thing and held it. But she had a drawer now, and a section of bookshelf. And there was an evidence trail of her in his kitchen. Her particular way of organizing spices, her coffee that was different from his coffee, the very small succulent that she'd transplanted from the gallery, and that was now, inexplicably, thriving on his windowsill in a way it had never managed on hers. "It likes it here," she said, finding him looking at it one morning. "So do I," he said, and she wasn't entirely sure he was talking about the plant. Andre came for dinner one Sunday, brought apparently by some shift in his relationship to the situation, some reconciliation of his protectiveness with his brother's changed state. He arrived with wine he'd chosen carefully, and an expression that was not exactly warm, but was no longer guarded. And over the course of 3 hours Valentina watched, with quiet joy, as the two men talked in a way that suggested they had not talked like this in a long time. There was history between them, deep, complicated, old, and it was not all good history. There were silences that held weight. But there was also genuine love, the kind that has survived a great deal and is therefore more real than the kind that has not been tested. After dinner, when Nikolai was in the kitchen, and she and Andre were alone for a moment, Andre said, "I was wrong about you." "You weren't entirely wrong," she said. "I am a risk to him." "Yes," he said, "but you're also," he seemed to wrestle with himself briefly, "you're also what makes the risk worth carrying." A pause. "I see the difference in him. I want you to know that I see it." "What difference?" she asked. "He laughs," Andre said simply. "He didn't before. Not really." She looked at him. "Thank you," she said. He nodded once. They did not hug. Andre was not a hugger. She'd established this. But he met her eyes with something genuine, and it was enough. The practical consequences of the Marchetti situation continued to unfold in ways she mostly didn't have access to. Nikolai told her, in the broad strokes he'd promised, when significant developments occurred. The first consequence arrived in March, a quiet financial catastrophe for a Marchetti subsidiary in Prague that was made to look like market forces. The second came in April. A partnership Marchetti had been building for 2 years quietly dissolved after its other party received certain information that Nikolai did not specify. The third was still coming. "How long until he knows it was you?" she asked. "He may never know with certainty," Nikolai said. "That's the point. Certainty requires proof. I don't leave proof." She thought about this. That must be profoundly frustrating for him. "Profoundly," he agreed, with a satisfaction that was entirely controlled, and therefore, somehow, more alarming than if he'd gloating. "You enjoy it," she said. "I find it professionally satisfying," he said, with precision. "Same thing." The corner of his mouth moved. "Perhaps." She shook her head, fighting the smile. He was not a good man, or not only a good man. She'd stopped trying to resolve that tension, and started trying to simply hold it, to love what was real without pretending it was something cleaner than it was. It turned out, that was, in its own way, easier than she'd expected, because what was real was extraordinary. It came from a direction she hadn't anticipated. It was April, 3 months after the safe house, 2 months after the return to the apartment. She was at the gallery, absorbed in the final stages of the Czech landscape acquisition. The provenance was finally clear, the ownership chain documented from 1932 to the present, a story of flight and loss, and eventual, circuitous return to something like stability. She loved this part of the work, the reconstruction of a life through objects. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered. Cruz. Ms. Cruz. A voice she didn't recognize. Male, Italian accent, professional tone. "My name is Federici. I'm a journalist with La Stampa. I'm writing a piece about Nikolai Sorokin, and I wanted to give you the opportunity to comment before publication." She was immediately, completely still. "I don't know what you mean," she said. "I think you do," Federici said. "I have documentation of your personal relationship with Sorokin, your presence at a property he uses for business purposes, multiple verified instances of cohabitation at his registered address. I also have, and I want to give you the chance to respond to this, documentation suggesting that your position at the gallery was obtained through Sorokin's influence, rather than purely on merit. Cold moved through her. That's not true, she said. My documentation suggests your documentation is incorrect. She kept her voice completely level. I was hired by Dr. Elena Ferretti based on an interview and my professional qualifications. Mr. Sorokin had no involvement in that process. Are you willing to go on record? I'm not going on record about anything right now, she said. If you're planning to publish something, you should send your questions to me in writing. Don't call me again unannounced. She hung up. She sat in her office for 30 seconds doing nothing, her phone face down on the desk, her hands very still. Then she called Nikolai. He answered in one ring. Valentina. A journalist called me, she said. La Stampa, someone named Federici. He has documentation of our relationship, and he's implying I got my job through your influence. A short silence. Are you at the gallery? He said. Yes. Stay there. I'll give me 10 minutes. Nikolai, is this Marchetti? A longer pause. It might be something else. What else? He didn't answer. What else? She repeated, and something in her voice must have conveyed that she was not going to let this go. Because after another pause, he said, there are people in my world who have concerns about changes I've been making, about the direction I'm moving in, about the life I'm building. A pause. Not Marchetti. Internal. She absorbed this. Someone inside your organization is trying to use me to destabilize you, she said. That's my concern, yes. His voice was very careful. Controlled. Who? I don't know yet. Do you have a suspicion? A very long pause. Nikolai. There is someone, he said, who has been uncomfortable with the direction of my decisions for some time, who believes that my relationship with you represents a shift in priorities that is unfavorable to his position. His position, she said. Silence. Andre, she said. No. Immediately, definitely. Not Andre. Never Andre. Then who? His name is Kozlov, Nikolai said. He's been with my family for 15 years. He has interests in maintaining the current structure that would be undermined by the changes I'm making. The movement toward legitimacy. He sees it as weakness. He sees, a pause. He sees you as the source of it. She sat with this for a moment. He thinks I'm making you weak, she said. He thinks you're making me human, Nikolai said. The words had a particular quality, not defensive, not angry, but something that sounded almost like they'd been thought for a while and were finally being said out loud. And in his framework, those are the same thing. She looked up at Czech landscape on her desk, at its melancholy gray-green light, at the long story of survival it represented. What are you going to do? She asked. Deal with it, he said. That's not a sufficient answer. I know, he paused. I'm going to bring Kozlov in, have a conversation about the situation and about what he thinks he's achieving. And I'm going to make clear to him, in terms that leave no ambiguity, that interfering in my personal life, in you specifically, is something I will not tolerate from anyone, regardless of history, regardless of structure. And the journalist will be managed. The story won't run. How? Valentina. His voice was very quiet. Please don't ask me to detail everything. I'm telling you the broad shape because I promised I would. I'm asking you to trust me with the specifics. She thought about the line, the place where full transparency and practical wisdom diverged, about what she'd asked him for and what she'd actually meant by it. All right, she said. I'll be there in an hour. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, he said. I want to. There's a difference. She almost smiled. An hour, she said. An hour, he confirmed, and then, quietly before he hung up, Valentina. Yes. I'm sorry, he said, for all of it, for the parts you didn't ask for. Stop apologizing for existing, she said. I chose this. I know, he said. I'm still sorry. Page 2, Chapter 18, Kozlov. She didn't see the conversation with Kozlov. Nikolai had told her about it afterward. Enough of it, the shape of it. Kozlov was a man in his mid-50s who had been with the Sorokin network since his father's time. He was, in the hierarchy, a senior operational figure, not Nikolai Z, but close to it, one of the architects of the family's European interests. He had built a life on the assumption that the structure would remain as he understood it, and Nikolai's years of deliberate repositioning had been to him a slow erosion of everything he'd invested in. When Nikolai brought him in and laid out what had been done, the journalist, the documentation, the deliberate destabilization, Kozlov didn't deny it. "She's going to cost you everything you've built," Kozlov said, in Russian, reportedly. "She makes you slow, careful. You're thinking about her when you should be thinking about the work." "I'm thinking about both," Nikolai said. "The difference is that one of them is worth thinking about." "You sound like your father when he fell in love with that woman in Rome. He lost 2 years of territory." "I am not my father," Nikolai said, "and I won't be compared to him in this context or any other." The silence that followed was, apparently, significant. "What are you going to do to me?" Kozlov had asked. And Nikolai had told her his answer, and she'd sat with it, and it was not what she'd expected. He'd removed Kozlov from his senior position, restructured around him, transferred his operational authority to 2 other people, and then, this was the part she hadn't expected, offered him a managed exit, an acknowledgement of 15 years of service, alongside an absolute clarity that the service was over. "You could have done something worse," she said, when he told her. "Yes," he said. "Why didn't you?" He was quiet for a moment. "Because 15 years ago he was loyal to my father in circumstances that could have cost him everything. And because what he did was wrong, but it came from a place I understand, from fear of losing something he'd built his life on." A pause. "And because you would not want me to do something worse, and what you want matters to me more than making an example." She looked at him. "You've never said that before," she said, in that direct a way. "I've meant it for a long time," he said. "I'm still learning to say the things I mean." "You're getting better at it," she said. "I have good incentive," he said. The journalist, that was the part she didn't ask about and wouldn't. The conversation with Federici that somehow resulted in the article never appearing, and the documentation apparently proving insufficient for publication purposes. She chose not to know the mechanism. She chose to understand it as belonging to the category of things Nikolai handled in ways she couldn't endorse and couldn't ask him to stop. It was imperfect. Her life was imperfect. She was starting to think imperfect and real was worth considerably more than perfect and hollow. The Czech landscape acquisition was approved by the Ferretti board in May. She hung it herself, stood in the gallery's main hall, and positioned it with the specific care it deserved, considering the light, the sight lines, the conversation it would have with the other pieces in the room. Elena Ferretti stood beside her and looked at it for a long moment. "It belonged here," Elena said. "It took a long time to come home." "Yes," Valentina said, and meant several things at once. Chapter 19. Lake Ohrid. He kept his promise. June came, and the situation was stable. Marchetti was navigating his slowly collapsing empire with characteristic denial. Kozlov was gone. The apartment had lost the last of its damaged smell and become fully itself again. And Nikolai looked at her one morning over coffee and said, "This weekend, Ohrid. Say yes." "Yes," she said, before he'd finished the sentence. He smiled. They drove, 12 hours, through Italy and Slovenia and Croatia and Macedonia. Because he preferred to drive long distances, because it was, he said, one of the few times his mind could be completely in one place. She drove the first half, he drove the second, and they listened to music she'd put on the stereo, and talked for some hours, and were silent for others. The easy silence of 2 people who no longer needed to fill space. The house emerged from the lake road in the early evening. Not large, not grand, a 2-story stone building with a terrace that overhung the water, and light the color of honey coming off the surface of the lake below. The mountains were enormous and patient on all sides. The village was a 10-minute walk away, and the nearest city was an hour. She got out of the car and stood and looked at it. Old water, old mountains, he'd said. He'd been right. It was the quietest place she had ever been. The kind of quiet that was not absence, but presence. The presence of something very old and very indifferent to human complications. A geological patience that made everything else feel small and temporary, and therefore bearable. "Oh," she said. He was beside her. "Yes. How long have you had this?" 11 years. I bought it when things were very difficult, when I needed somewhere to put down whatever I was carrying." He looked at the lake. "I haven't been here in 2 years. I kept planning to come, and something always got in the way." "What got in the way this time was me," she said. "No." He turned to her. "This time, what got me here was you." She took his hand. He held it. They stood and looked at the lake in the evening light for a while, and it was exactly what he'd said. Enough space to breathe, and she breathed, and so did he, and the old mountains held them both, without judgment. Inside, the books he'd mentioned, an entire room of them, the piano, an upright Steinway, slightly out of tune as promised, with the specific warmth of an instrument that has been played and loved and is not primarily decorative. A kitchen that smelled of old wood and years of cooking. Bedrooms with windows that opened onto the lake, so that sleeping there was sleeping beside something ancient and alive. He made dinner that first night. Something simple. Fish from the lake, bought from a man in the village who apparently knew him. Vegetables from a small garden at the side of the house that had been maintained in his absence by the village woman who kept the place habitable. They ate on the terrace, in the warm June dark, with the water below them and the stars above them, and the mountains a darker dark on the horizon. "Tell me something," she said. "Something you've never told anyone." He considered this. Not deflecting, not performing, actually thinking. "I nearly left," he said. "The life, the work. 12 years ago, I had a moment where I understood clearly what the next 20 years would be if I stayed in it, and I almost chose differently." "What stopped you?" she asked. "Fear," he said, "not of the people who would come after me, although that was part of it. Fear of having built nothing else, of being nothing else. I'd been this for so long that I didn't know what the other version of me looked like. I was 29 years old, and I had no idea who I was outside of what I did." "Who are you?" she asked. "Outside of what you do." He looked at the lake. "A man who reads too much," he said, "who plays the piano badly by formal standards and with something real underneath, who loves this lake and these mountains and has been lonely in them for 11 years. He paused. "Who loves you, who is learning, slowly and imperfectly, to be that person more than the other one." She looked at him in the dark, at the person she'd been learning for months, at the layers she'd been given access to, one at a time, by a man who'd spent decades building walls and was piece by piece taking them down. "You're already that person," she said. "You've been that person the whole time. The other one is the performance." He looked at her. "Say that again," he said quietly. "The version of you that runs a criminal enterprise and doesn't show his face, and is feared in specific rooms, that's the performance," she said. "The books and the piano and the lake, and the man who checked on the piano first after a bomb went off in his apartment, that's who you actually are." "It took 40 minutes, he said finally. "What?" "The first night, 40 minutes before you told me I was lonely." His voice was very quiet. "Most people never got there at all." "I was paying attention," she said. "You always pay attention." He reached across the table and took her hand. "It's the most extraordinary thing about you. You pay attention in a way that sees people accurately, without the distortions that come from wanting them to be something else." "I wanted you to be safe," she said. "I didn't need you to be anything else." He looked at her hand in his for a moment. When he looked up, his eyes in the dark had that quality she'd first seen in the safe house. The last armor gone, the essential Nikolai, full and open and present. "Come inside," he said. "I'll make you coffee and play you something that I haven't played for anyone." "Tell me what it is," she said. "Come inside and find out," he said, and smiled. Chapter 20. The Truth of Him. He played for an hour. She sat on the old sofa with her coffee going cold beside her, and listened to him play in a way she hadn't heard before. Not the controlled precision of performance, not the meditative quality of thinking through music, but something that was both and neither, and more. He played old things, Russian folk melodies transposed into something modern, Scriabin's late works, a piece by a Hungarian composer she didn't recognize that made her chest ache with its beauty. And then, the thing he'd promised to play. It was the composition she'd heard beginnings of in Milan, the piece that had been evolving over the months of knowing her, but complete now, all the fragments resolved into a whole. It was, she didn't have adequate language. It was searching and certain in turns. It had the quality of something that had been worked out through difficulty and arrived somewhere real. It had the specific sound of a person finding their way through dark to something that mattered. When he finished, she realized she'd been holding her breath. "Valentina," he said, "the piece. That's its name." "I know," she said. "You told me." He turned on the piano bench to face her. "I've been writing it since the night I first sat across from you in this apartment, and you said something no one has ever said to me," he said. "Which part?" "Lonely," he said. "That I was lonely. Most people never say the true thing directly. They circle it, they imply it, they let you maintain whatever fiction serves the moment." He paused. "You said it straight, without armor, without apology, and I thought, there is a person who is not afraid of the truth. Not even the uncomfortable kind." He paused. "You said it straight, without armor, without apology, and I thought, there is a person who is not afraid of the truth. Not even the uncomfortable kind." "I am afraid of a lot of things," she said. "I know," he said. "That's what makes the directness remarkable. You choose it despite the fear. That's what courage actually is." He paused. "I've been trying to learn it from you." She looked at him, at the man she loved, the full, real, imperfect, morally complicated, fundamentally extraordinary man she loved, lit by the single lamp and the remembered sound of the music, still hanging in the air. She crossed the room. She stopped in front of him, standing while he sat on the bench, so that for once their heights were reversed, and she put both hands on his face, and he looked up at her with everything open, with no wall left between himself and what he felt. "I love you," she said. "Everything you are, not the safe parts, all of it. For one moment. Just one." The composed, controlled, formidable Nikolai Sorokin let himself simply feel it, without managing it, without measuring what it cost, or what it risked, or what it meant strategically. He simply felt it. When he opened his eyes, they were darker, warmer, full of something that was not sadness, but had sadness in its history. The specific quality of joy that has arrived through long waiting. "I have something to ask you," he said. She waited. He stopped, started again. His composure, normally absolute, was cracked open in a way that was more intimate than anything preceding it. "I want to build something with you, not just this, not just what we have, something permanent, something that commits to the future." He held her gaze. "I understand if it's too soon. I understand if the complications are too significant. I'm asking anyway because I told you I don't do things halfway, and this is not halfway for me. This is the whole thing. This is everything." She was very still. Are you saying what I think you're saying?" she asked. "I'm saying I want to marry you," he said, and then, with a quality of absolute simplicity, "if you'll have me." The lake moved outside, the mountains were dark and old and patient. The piano was slightly out of tune behind him, and her coffee was cold, and the lamp cast warm light on the most real and most frightening moment of her adult life. She had walked into a wrong room. She had been told she wasn't going anywhere. She had chosen, over and over, at every turning point, with her eyes open and her hands clear. She had chosen this man, this life, this love, with its specific weight and its specific beauty. "Yes," she said. Simple, complete. He stood, kissed her, slowly, the way he'd kissed her the first time. Then he held her face in his hands, and pressed his forehead to hers, and just breathed. And she felt the trembling in him, the actual, physical trembling of a man who has held himself together through enormous things, and is now, in the presence of something good and true, allowed to tremble. "I didn't know," he said, against her forehead. "I didn't know if this was something I could have, something I was allowed to have." "You're allowed," she said. "I've hurt people," he said. "I've done things." "I know," she said. "You're still allowed." "I'm not a good man." "You're a real man," she said. "That's better." He held her. Outside, the lake was dark and ancient, and completely indifferent to the human drama on its shores, which was exactly correct. And the mountains stood as they had for 10,000 years, and somewhere in the village below a dog barked once, and was quiet. Chapter 21. After the yes. They stayed at Ohrid for 11 days. She had expected, after the proposal, some kind of change, some shift in the quality of things. What she found instead was a deepening of what was already there, as though the yes had been a door, and walking through it didn't change the landscape, but made the light clearer. He was, she struggled, as she always did, for the right word. Joyful was too clean, too uncomplicated. Happy was insufficient. Something more specific, released, as though something had been finally set down, some weight carried so long it had become structural. And without it, he moved differently. He laughed more. Not constantly, not in a way that was unlike him. He was still fundamentally a contained, serious man. But the specific frequency of it increased, and each time it surprised her the same amount, this evidence of what was possible. He fixed the piano. He called a man from the village who apparently knew about pianos, and spent one afternoon with him, working through the tuning, and she heard the process from the terrace. The careful negotiation of pitch, the repeated returns to specific notes, the patient work of bringing something back to what it was supposed to be. When it was done, he played it, alone for a while, the music drifting out over the water. She was sitting on the terrace reading when she heard him stop. "Valentina," he called. She went inside. He was still at the piano. "Come sit with me," he said, moving to one end of the bench. She sat beside him, his shoulder against hers, the keys in front of both of them, white and black and bright. "Show me something," she said. "I thought you didn't play." "I don't. Show me something very simple." He took her right hand and positioned it on the keys. Gentle, precise, the way he did everything deliberate. He placed her fingers on 3 notes. "These 3, he said. C, E, G, the root chord, the beginning of everything. He guided her hand, showed her the press of it, the specific weight needed, the release. The notes rang out. She played it, badly. "Again," he said. She played it again, better. "That's a chord," he said. "That's music." She looked at the keys. "Everything starts there?" "Everything starts there," he said. "And from there you can go anywhere." She played the chord again. It rang out in the tuned piano, clear and clean and absolutely simple, and it was the beginning of something. The root, the ground. She leaned her head against his shoulder. He put his arm around her. Outside, the lake went on toward the mountains, patient as it had been before they arrived, and as it would be long after. And the light in the room was warm, and the sound of the chord faded slowly into the silence that followed music. Chapter 22. The Third Consequence. They returned to Milan in July. The third consequence for Sava Marchetti arrived in August, the most significant of the 3, the one that would take him years to map back to its source, and even more years to accept. A regulatory investigation, meticulously constructed, drawing on information that had been compiled quietly and delivered through 3 layers of anonymous intermediary to an investigating magistrate, who had been waiting years for exactly this kind of documented evidence. Marchetti's financial architecture in the Eastern markets, the thing he'd fought so hard to protect, began to fracture along lines that had been, over 4 years of careful preparation, deliberately weakened. Nikolai told her about it over dinner. The specific satisfaction in his voice was contained, professional, almost academic. He spoke about the mechanism the way he spoke about complicated acquisitions, with precise appreciation for the craft of it. "Is he going to be arrested?" she asked. "Possibly. Eventually. That's not the goal. The goal is that he can no longer operate at the scale he does, and that he knows it came from somewhere but cannot prove where, and that every time he tries to expand the way he did before, he will find something in the way." A pause. "He'll spend the rest of his operational life looking over his shoulder at shadows that never materialize into proof." She thought about this. "That's crueler than arrest," she said. "Yes," he said, without apology. "Does it bother you, that it's cruel?" "Some things I do bother me," he said. "Some things I have done bother me considerably. This particular thing, no. He tried to harm you. He tried to use you. That has a specific cost, and I have a specific policy about it. And I find I am not troubled by the outcome." She looked at him. "I'm not going to tell you that's wrong," she said. "No? I said I wasn't naive," she said, "and I'm not. I need to know that you carry the moral weight of it rather than just the operational satisfaction." He held her gaze for a long time. "I carry all of it," he said, finally. "Everything. Always." A pause. "That's why I needed the lake." She nodded. "Good," she said, not approving, acknowledging, holding the complexity of it without demanding it be otherwise. He reached across the table. She took his hand. Chapter 23. Lena. She and Lena had continued their friendship through the months after the safe house. Coffee, occasional dinners, the kind of friendship that develops quickly between people who have been through something together and found they valued what they found in each other. It was Lena who told her, on an October afternoon over coffee in the Brera, about the wider world Nikolai moved in. Not operationally. Lena was far too disciplined for that, but the texture of it, the specific human topography. "You should know about the people who are glad," Lena said. "Glad? That he is changing, the direction he's going." She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "There are people inside this world who are tired, who got in young and found themselves building a life they can't leave because they don't know how to leave, and they look at what he's doing, the legitimate side, the movement toward it, and they see something, a possibility. He doesn't know how many people he's showing something to. By doing what he's doing. By choosing what he's choosing." Valentina thought about this. "Does he know you feel this way?" she asked. "He knows I'm loyal," Lena said. "He doesn't need to know the specific reasoning." "You should tell him," Valentina said. "He thinks he's carrying it alone, the weight of the transition. He doesn't know he's carrying other people's hope in the same load." Lena considered this. "You think he'd want to know?" "I think it would change the weight of it," Valentina said. "I think it would make it mean something different." A pause. "You're very good at this," Lena said, "at knowing what people need." "I pay attention," Valentina said. "That's all." "No," Lena said, "it's not all. Most people pay attention to the surface. You pay attention to the structure underneath." She paused. "It's why you're right for him. He's all structure. He needs someone who can read it." Valentina thought about that for a while. That evening, she told Nikolai what Lena had said. Not about Lena's own feeling, but about the others, about the people who watched him and found hope in the watching. He was quiet for a long time. "I didn't know," he said. "I know you didn't," she said. It doesn't change the necessity of the work," he said. "The necessity of being careful, of taking the time it takes." She said, "It doesn't change the necessity. It changes the meaning." She looked at him. "You're not just building an exit for yourself. You're building a road, and some people are going to follow it." He looked at the fire, at the books, at whatever interior landscape he was always navigating. "That's a significant thing to carry," he said. "Yes," she said, "it is. You can carry it." He turned to look at her. "With you," he said, "I can carry anything with you." Chapter 24. The Ring. It was simple. That surprised her. She'd expected from a man with his resources and his particular quality of precision something elaborate. Some extraordinary gesture involving significant stones and elaborate settings, and all the weight of a man who did nothing halfway. What he produced one Sunday morning in November, 1 year almost to the day from the Sorrento estate, was a ring from his jacket pocket. An old ring, platinum, with a central sapphire the color of the late afternoon sky, and 2 small diamonds on either side, set in a style that was clearly not contemporary. "My grandmother's," he said, simply, without preamble, without ceremony, just sitting across from her at the kitchen table over coffee in the Sunday morning quiet. "She was the only person in my family she was remarkable, difficult and principled and stubborn in all the right ways." He paused. "She would have liked you." "Would she?" Valentina said softly. "She had no patience for performance," he said. "She would have appreciated someone who said straight that her grandson was lonely." The corner of his mouth moved. "She also would have told you, in the same conversation, exactly what you were getting into, with more detail than I provided." "Smart woman," Valentina said. "The smartest I knew," he said, until he stopped. He held out the ring. "Until now," he said. She looked at it, at the old sapphire and its particular color, at his hand, steady and certain. She took it. She put it on herself, on her left hand, and held it out between them, and they both looked at it for a moment. This small, old, meaningful object that had traveled a long way to arrive here. "Since the wrong door. The most consequential accident," he said. "Of your life," she said. "You said." "Of my life," he confirmed. She leaned across the table and kissed him. He kissed her back, there at the kitchen table with the Sunday morning moving around them, and the ring on her hand, and everything settled and real and true. "The Vienna agreements," she said, against his mouth. "Orid, the piano, the ring." She pulled back enough to see his face. "You're not going backward." "Never," he said, and meant it with everything he had. Chapter 25. What she started. Here is what Valentina Cruz started, by walking into the wrong room. She started a man paying attention to who he was becoming, not only what he was managing. She started the specific, radical practice of being known by someone who didn't need you to be different, and whose presence made different feel possible anyway. She started a war, not Marchetti's, not Kozlov's, the quiet internal war that Nikolai Sorokin had been avoiding for 2 decades, the war between what he'd built and what he wanted, between the architecture of control and the freedom of choosing something terrifying because it was true. She started in a man who had spent 20 years being only what was useful, the long and complicated and ongoing process of being everything. This is not a story with a clean ending. Clean endings belong to stories that don't take their subjects seriously. Nikolai's world was not clean, would not be clean, not entirely, not for years, possibly not ever. There would be other Marchettis, other Kozlovs, other 3 in the morning phone calls, and other 12 days in safe houses, and other mornings where the weight of what he was made the space between them heavy. She knew this. She had always known this. She had chosen it with her eyes open, and she would continue to choose it, every day with her eyes open, for the same reason she'd chosen it the first time, because he was real, because she was seen, because love that asks nothing of the world to be clean is love that hasn't met the world yet. And there would be Lake Ohrid, when the weight got too heavy, the old mountains, the out-of-tune piano that was now in tune, the terrace over the water. There would be the root chord, C, E, G, the beginning of everything. There would be mornings. Epilogue 1 year later. The Ferretti Gallery hosted its annual winter exhibition in December. Valentina had curated it, her first full curatorial project, and it was, Elena Ferretti said privately to 2 members of the board, the finest exhibition the gallery had mounted in 15 years. The theme was survival and continuity, how objects carry memory through catastrophe, how beauty persists through disruption, how the things humans make outlast the circumstances that made them. The Czech landscape was there. It had pride of place, a small painting easily overlooked, with its particular melancholy gray-green light, and the story she had written for the wall card, not the legal provenance, which was documented elsewhere, but the human provenance, where it had been, what had passed around it, how it had come here. Nikolai stood in front of it for a long time on opening night. She came to stand beside him. "You chose this one first," he said. "When you started at the Ferretti, this was the piece you were most certain about." "It spoke to me," she said. "What did it say?" She looked at the small gray-green landscape. "At its survival. That things can come home," she said. "Even when home is somewhere they've never been. Even after everything." He was quiet for a moment. "Come home to me tonight," he said. "Always," she said. Around them the gallery moved. People in beautiful clothes, looking at beautiful things. The low murmur of appreciation and interpretation. The specific music of a room full of people encountering art. Elena was across the room, watching them with her perceptive old eyes, and her carefully managed non-expression. Andrei was there, which was new. He'd come. His first gallery event, standing with the mild discomfort of a man who was doing something unfamiliar because he wanted to, not because it was easy. Lena was with him, the two of them having found in the months since the safe house some version of friendship that surprised them both. Victor was near the door, because Victor was always near the door, and he nodded at her when she caught his eye, with an expression that was as close to warm as Victor got, which was, she had come to understand, quite warm indeed. This was the life. This was what a life looked like, built on the specific foundation of two people who had refused to be less than what they were, who had refused to simplify themselves for each other's comfort, who had looked at the complicated truth of what they were and chosen it, all of it, every inconvenient and dangerous and beautiful and real part of it. She reached for Nikolai's hand. He took it. The light in the gallery was warm and golden. The Czech landscape glowed quietly in its frame. Outside, Milan was cold and dark and full of its ordinary life. And somewhere past Italy was a lake and mountains and a piano that was now in tune. And Valentina Cruz, who had walked into the wrong room 1 year ago and been told she was not going anywhere, stood in the room where she had always been meant to be, with her hand in his, going nowhere, exactly where she'd chosen. The beginning, after all, is C, E, and G. 3 notes, the root chord, from which you can go anywhere.